Hi, Drew. Thanks for joining today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, police officer, teacher, mentor, team building, you have an incredible career path now. And definitely, we're going to dive into a number of different subjects. But I kind of want to start almost like in the meat of it, in the sense of like, because you were kind of telling me some terms, and I know that you have a lot of writing on your website and things like that, which we'll share later. But about de-escalation, situational awareness, and preparedness because of your, being a first responder or working with first responders and working in that high stress environment. And the thing before we kind of springboard aboard and I kind of hand the mic off to you, I just want to say too is that I think real or imagined, I believe that we all experience those high levels of stress, even in situations that aren't necessarily a first responder. You know, I don't want to diminish that people are in office situations or whatever it is, but we handle our own levels of stress differently. And I believe that and just to kind of pump the tires a little, I believe what you're teaching is really resonates on all levels, not just high intensity. And I think the recognition is really important. But tell just start. Let's start in that arena there, just about kind of the bulk of what you kind of work with and teach.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I first started out, I started as a police officer for 18 years. And then after, I went through two promotion opportunities, didn't get it. I decided, you know what, I really like the training aspects of this, and I like teaching other police officers about de-escalation, use of force, active shooter training, and so I decided to go back, get my master's degree, and then that's when I became a high school teacher, and I taught from high school to college level with that, and I just really enjoyed that. Where I think I was blessed with the gift to put things into layman's terms so that people can understand it. And when I first started my business and I thought about, de-escalation, truly I thought about, let's just start training other police officers. And what that morphed into is corporate America. And I realized that the gifts that I've had in 18 years of law enforcement about how to de-escalate people in really stressful situations really came out in corporate America where, it could be manufacturing, it could be construction, it could be retail, whatever it is that people have these tough, tough times. And what happens is, we're all wired for survival. So when someone gets spun up, the neural pathways that go in our brain, people are wired to survive and then they're not thinking clearly. They're not thinking rationally. And so when I would go on calls as a police officer, I would get there and I'd start thinking like, geez, why is this person so upset with me right away? I didn't even do anything to upset them. And then when I started looking into the neuroscience behind it, it started making sense that it's almost like an amygdala hijack where people would enter their fight flight mode and then they're not thinking rationally. It shuts off that portion of their brain, the rational way of thinking in your prefrontal cortex. And so I started just teaching people about that when you have these people that are upset, on average, it takes about 20 to 60 minutes for them to really pass that and get back to their rational way of thinking. So there's ways that we can speed up that process. And really, what I started focusing on is how do we de escalate ourselves? And then how do we de escalate others? Because we got to know how to get ourselves in check. And then we got to know how to de escalate others. And that kind of morphed into my high stakes teamwork and a couple other things. But really, it was through that de escalation and knowing what to do with yourself and then to others that really panned out really well. And just simple tools that I've learned over the course of being a police officer.
Yeah, that I'm really glad you kind of touched on the de-escalation of ourselves because
Yeah.
I can't tell you, we all experience in communication, just general conversation. I think even too, this isn't exactly the same thing, but I think that there's these locational positions that maybe somebody's talking about like the wide angle or the creative aspect, and somebody's stuck on the logical side. And this is just a much more nuanced thing, but we're not always attuned to each other's conversations, but then add what you're talking about is, which I love the term amygdala hijacking. I think
Yeah.
there's a lot of depth there with that, and that fight or flight. Um, it's you truly aren't. You're not thinking completely emotionally. So I would say your EQ is lowered and irrational response mechanisms, I would imagine, start to accelerate. So I just wanted to commend you on that as far as that internal first. Like, let's
Yeah.
start with us. Let's pull that, and then go through. So now in that kind of de-escalation, and that really covers a lot too, is just the de-escalation is just again in any conversation, people let their emotional levels get away from us all the time. But are there kind of I mean, is it kind of like a one, two, three step? I mean, is it kind of like identify with them, understand them, or is it a little bit more intuitive dance?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And what I look at and what I tell people is, over 18 years of being a police officer, I went through a lot of de-escalation classes, a lot of courses, a lot of good information. And through those ones, I would find little things that are like, okay, I like that, I like that. But a lot of it was just de-escalating others. And so I had to kind of do the work on my own to find out de-escalation of yourself. And what I have figured out is what are those things that trigger us? And so what I ask them is I say, "When's the last time you've been cut off in traffic? And what did you do when you got cut off in traffic? And what did you feel like?" And the reason I say that is because some people have done some of the worst things ever after they've been cut off in traffic, where these are normal human beings working, 9 to 5, and they will literally chase someone down and go to their house and they will, start a fight with them and do all that. And it's like you are so far offline when you're doing that and you're not rationally thinking. So I'll give them some examples. I'll say, okay, have you been cut off in traffic? Yes. Okay, I know what that's like. Have you gotten a passive aggressive email or a bad text message from your boss and you want to respond right away? What would that response look like now versus 60 minutes? Why is that happening?
Sure.
Those kinds of things. And so what I do is I just start to tell them you'll start to feel your heart rate start to jump up a little bit, and then you'll start to feel this tense kind of feeling in your brain where you're going to want to react right away. It's this instant kind of fight mode where I am wired to survive. Right now, I'm going to respond to this email immediately, or I'm going to chase this person down that just cut me off. And that's when I tell them the first thing that you should do when that happens is start to box breathe. Box breathing is, inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4. And as you do that, that starts to engage your parasympathetic nervous system. Because when you're all revved up, that's your sympathetic nervous system going full tilt. But when you engage your parasympathetic nervous system, which I like to call kind of the yoga brain, that starts to calm you back down. And it's just a quicker way to do that. Because on average, it lasts about 20 minutes. But if you do that, you can speed up that process. This is what Navy SEALs do a lot to get back to the rational way of thinking. And so when I tell them, when you start to get these kind of things happen, you come in the door late to work and your boss is doing one of these, or you're getting cut off in traffic, or you're getting that bad email. When you start to feel your heart rate get up, or your significant other says something to you, take a breath. Start by just breathing. And then just other ways that you can de escalate yourself, getting out in nature, going for a brisk walk, calling a loved one, and then box breathing. So if you think about that, and if you can do all four of them, great. But when you do that, then you can get back to your rational way of thinking. And what I tell managers about this too is, for managers, it's if you're coming in late to work and you're upset already and you have to address one of your employees about something, maybe wait a good hour before you talk to them about that because you're already escalated to that point and that conversation's not going to go good. Because now if you have two escalated people, nothing's getting done. It's highly emotional conversation. So that's where I start with the whole de-escalating yourself.
That I even to the listening stops in those phases as well. You just don't we've all experienced it, but you
Yeah.
just don't even hear what they're saying. It's just like and you have two people just wanting to say that's it. And the email thing and their text thing is pretty important too, I think from the time frame. I always do it for the following day.
Yeah.
If it's that following morning,
Yeah.
that just leave it. You could write your nasty draft.
Yeah.
I was, I'm going to handle this in a professional way or something like that, or just a common courtesy, respectful way.
100%. And
That's
and I've always thought to myself too is some of the best managers and the best bosses I've ever had or people that led me is if I screwed up, they would always give me a chance to respond. And like you're talking about where the listening goes out the window, you're absolutely right. And so when I think to myself, okay, if I'm a manager, I'm a boss, and someone makes a mistake, instead of shooting them a text message or this really nasty email, you screwed this up. How about having that face to face conversation, just saying, hey, something happened yesterday. And again, I'm getting a second hand, maybe even third hand. And I just want to know, could you tell me about what's going on here? Because sometimes we can just throw blame on people right away and it might not even been their fault. And so how about having that face-to-face conversation, or if it is an email or text, just say, "Hey, could you tell me about what happened yesterday? I'm just curious what's going on there," instead of just throwing that blame on them right away.
Yeah, especially in a team too, because there is something to be said about having your team's members back. So in again, a work situation, it might be an angry customer that says like, your administrative assistant or whatever it was is like, was completely rude to me. And they said this and they didn't do this and they said they were going to do this. And I think as, say like a manager or boss, it's easy to be like, the customer, yeah, they're mad. Okay. So you come down on this employee, but at the same time, what you just said is gives them a chance because it's like, wait a second, we're in this together.
Yeah.
And I need to, this person needs to know that we're in this together no matter what in that team supportive dynamic. It's really important to have, feel like you have insurance back, but it also give somebody a chance to kind of tell the story. And you might find out this other person was completely, or you might see through all the BS and, that person was actually wrong. But either way,
Right.
he had a chance to kind of work with them and at least kind of pull that team together too.
100%. And then, one of the other things I say to people with this is if you care about other people, and especially if you have your team around you and you care about them and they know that, de escalation is 10 times easier. Because when you think about it, and the best bosses you've ever had in your life, and you think about it and you say, give me three attributes of the best boss you've ever had, a lot of times one of those top three is going to be they cared about me. They cared about me a lot. And when you care about people and you show that, the de-escalation part is so much easier because there's so many different methods out there to de-escalation, right? But there's active listening, empathy, building rapport, influence, behavior change. Well, if you already have good rapport with your people, your influence and your behavior change just speeds up the whole process because they know you care about them. And that helps out a lot too.
Yeah, those response mechanisms are going to be much softer if they know that you really kind of have their best interests at heart. People are, I think, taking criticism is one thing. And a lot of times we have to be kind of in a space to take it. But if you really know somebody has good intent around it, that allowance and softening is going to be in there, which actually brings almost to the same thing, not same thing, but in a next advance was situational awareness. I think is so incredibly important. And I think sometimes like field awareness, you hear, you're kind of in the midst of, I'm going to kind of use that similar where there's a lot of stress or there's confusion or you don't have all your information. And it's sometimes hard to take ourselves out and be a little bit of the observer and to get lost in the fray, get lost in kind of the battle of the moment and stuff like that too, which, I think ties into this de-escalation from what we're talking about. But, give me a little bit of insight into the situational awareness arena.
Yeah, one of my favorite things to talk about is situational awareness. I actually wrote a book. I co-wrote it with Dr. Richard Gassaway, a guy that has a PhD in neuroscience, and he did a lot of his research and everything for the firefighter world. And I'm a police officer, so I went to his 5-day master instructor course where I started learning some stuff that he did for his research for his PhD. And what was really interesting to me is there's a three-step process actually to situational awareness. When I first started, I only thought there was one part, and that was the perception part. Because if you ask people, hey, do you have good situational awareness? Tell me about it. And they go, yeah, I keep my head on a swivel. I look up, down, and all around. I watch my six. I do these kinds of things. That's great. That is the first part of situational awareness, which is perception, but your ability to perceive and understand what's happening around you while being mindful of how time is passing and then being able to accurately predict future events and time to avoid bad outcomes. That's the definition of situational awareness. So a lot of people don't get that there's actually a three-step process to it: perception, understanding, and prediction. And this is the interesting part, is that perception's that part where you're looking all around, all the kind of what I like to say is puzzle pieces are coming in through your senses. So your ears, your eyes, your nose, all your senses is these puzzle pieces are coming in to the brain to get assembled. And during that understanding part, that's where they're starting to get put together. So I'll give you a couple uh, things that I'm talking about when it comes to that. So you're looking at this perception, you're looking at these things, and now the puzzle pieces are coming in. Now they're starting to put together. I had a guy that was in a training one time that goes, "Yeah, I know what you're talking about there. I was driving down the road one time and I pull up to my house and I'm living with my sister at the time. And when I pull up, I see these garbage cans, like right next to the garbage cans, my really expensive stuff, my golf clubs, my like bow and arrow, a couple other things were sitting by the garbage cans. And I thought, gosh, that's really weird. So that's that understanding part, right? So he's seeing this. He's looking at it. The puzzle pieces are coming in, but now they got to start getting assembled. So he's starting to have this breakdown of what is this that I'm seeing? I'm visualizing all this kind of stuff. I'm looking at this, but it's not really adding up. That's the understanding part. Where's that moment of clarity or comprehension? So he goes into the house and he talks to his sister and he goes, "Do you know why all my expensive stuff's down at the driveway?" And he assumes that maybe she's going to kick him out. Like that's what his assumption is. And she goes, "I don't know what you're talking about." So he's having this moment of confusion, this moment of understanding, trying to figure out what's going on. He goes back outside, sees a car pull up, and when the car pulls up, someone grabs all of his expensive stuff, throws it in there, and takes off. He was being burglarized, but he didn't know it. There was his moment of clarity. There was his moment of comprehension. So that's the second part of situational awareness. Or great one that you probably experienced too, and we probably have different stories about this, but I can pull it up and remember it is during 9/11, I had a friend come up to me and say, "Hey, Drew, did you hear about one of these like big 747s just crashed into a tower in New York?" And I thought to myself, I'm like, "Gosh, that's weird." So the puzzle pieces are coming into my ear, right? They're coming in and I'm trying to understand what he's telling me. So it's coming in and I'm thinking right away to myself, I think, geez, what's going on here? Did maybe they have a medical situation? Did dispatch maybe screw this up? Is there a mechanical failure with the plane? So I'm starting to have this, put these puzzle pieces together to figure out what's going on. Then I sit down in Mr. Donovan's history class. I look up at the TV, and that's where I see that second plane hit. And then there was my moment of clarity. Oh my gosh, we're actually under attack. So that's that understanding piece that a lot of us have, but we don't really know what that's all about. And that's part of the situational awareness process. And then lastly is prediction. And it's all about making an accurate prediction. So Stephen Covey writes about this in his 7 Habits of Highly Effective People about highly effective people begin with the end in mind. So what we teach people is to begin with the end in mind. Look at the cover of that puzzle before you start putting it together. If you don't look at the cover, you don't know where the blue pieces are. You might think it's a lake, but it's actually the sky. If you have those green pieces, you might think it's trees, but it's really the grass. So really what it is taking that accurate prediction. Where is this going to happen 30 seconds from now? How can I get my team and my resources ready? If you're a firefighter, you pull up to the scene, you see a fire going. You take an accurate prediction, you say, okay, the wind's going this way, it's going to do this. So we got to attack it from this side versus that. If I'm a police officer and a pursuit's going and I know we're heading into downtown area and we're going really fast speeds, well, I better take this person out now or I got to terminate because I know that we're going right into a place with heavy pedestrian traffic. And if I don't take them out now, that can happen. So it's about making that accurate prediction. And those are the things that all come into the situational awareness process. There's a lot of barriers, but love the subject. Just got done teaching a class yesterday to dispatchers about this. Very good stuff.
Yeah. And is it, how do I say, is it, I want to say exercise, but does it become stronger with, I guess one of it, you kind of class those different things. So I guess there's the being aware of it and then start to work on it and become actually stronger at it.
Yeah,
Is that a real thing?
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And as you start to do that and you start to understand these things that can happen, and some of it has to do with your intuition, right? So during that understanding part, you might have that intuition, like when you were saying, stepping back. So if you are going around and all of a sudden you're seeing something, you're like, gosh, this looks kind of bad, or you're hearing something, you're like, this looks kind of bad. That's where that moment of, okay, my perception's coming in, and now I'm hitting that understanding level but things aren't feeling good. Like I got this knotted up feeling in my stomach, this gut feeling, or the hair on the back of my neck is standing up. My intuition's firing. That's where we always tell people that's that moment to take a step back. What is the external factors in my subconscious that's going on, that's picking up on all this that could hurt me right now? Because it will never come to you as knowledge. It comes to you as a feeling. And that's why we don't trust it. So that's where you're starting to put those pieces together and figure out what you have in your environment. And that's what we train people to do. And little things that you can pay attention to. So here's one of the scariest things that can happen with people's situational awareness where it can get eroded. It's one of the 100, there's over 100 roadblocks or barriers to it. One called task fixation. So when you're doing a task, focus is good, hyper focus is good, but fixation's horrible and fixation can get you killed. So for a police officer, for example, I'll give you what I mean by that. When I pull someone over and I got their license and I got my computer in front of me and I'm doing this, and I'm typing in some stuff. If I get fixated on my computer where I'm not breaking off from that, a guy can get out of the car, have a gun, and bring it right to the side of my um, right aside my window, and I don't even see him because I'm so fixated on what's in front of me. And this can happen to a lot of people in field. In oil and gas, they'll have pipe leaks, and people will be trying to fix the leaks, and they don't even realize that vapor clouds all around them, and they're encapsulated in vapor, and it could ignite at any second. But they're so fixated on what they're doing, it could kill them. So same thing with dispatchers. They're looking at one screen. They're so fixated on this screen, they're not even paying attention to that. So for every 20, 30 seconds, if you're doing that, take a step back, take a look at your surroundings. What can hurt me? Because when you're fixating on something, your cell phone right in front of your face, the other things around you, that's what could really hurt you.
Yeah, the, all that periphery. So when you were kind of explaining that too, it was, perception and perspective were coming to mind, and then rigidity, which you really nailed down. Because I was really thinking of that. I'm like, yeah, if you can get lost in the process, like I'm supposed to do this 1, 2,
Yeah.
3, 4, without the ability to be flexible or understand the iterations of the moment that are required for it. I believe a lot of us get very fixed on the way we perceive something how it should be, and or gaining perspective in the sense of almost kind of putting yourself in somebody else's shoes to maybe be predictive, which is that was kind of the perspective and the perception I was kind of thinking about, because you're essentially kind of in the instinct that ties in there, but you're almost kind of placing yourself in this rogue situation or this other person and trying to get as much context clues. Are they of their mind? Are they out
Yep.
of their mind? Are they, and you're probably as a police officer, I can only imagine, are they on some type of on something, or you're probably watching all those little cues. And now, if they're a rogue scenario, you're probably going to approach it in a certain way. If they're of calm communication, there's those other bookends of that type of thing. So yeah, I would say perception, perspective, and the rigidity are really powerful aspects. And you said it differently, but just kind of reinforcing what you said in there.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's the same thing with that perception and understanding. And a lot of it will be for me as a police officer is watching people's body language because I can lie to you all day with my verbals, which there's a lot of studies out there, but one of the ones I really like, and I can't remember the guy's name, but the 73855. So 7% of communication is just my verbal words, 38% is my tone, and 55% is my body language. And I always demonstrate this to people to say, watch, and I'll walk up to someone in class and I'll start kind of doing this with my knuckles and I'll start to put my shoulders up and I'll act like I'm going to punch them. And the whole time I'll say to them, I'll say, I'm not going to hit you. I don't want to hit you. Well, I said, now, how do you feel? And they're like, I feel like you're going to hit me. And I said, but I'm telling you, I'm not, because that's only 7%. My verbals are only 7%. But my body language, my 55, that's much louder. Even though I'm not even saying anything with it, 55% is just so much louder of what I'm doing. And people can't hide their nonverbals. You can tell when someone's nervous. You can tell when they're looking around doing one of these, like, is anyone watching me right now? You can't hide it. But I can tell you all day that, hey, I'm not going to steal anything. I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to run from you, officer, as they're running out the door. So
We got flip. Yeah, like,
exactly. So just little things
literally
that
on
you
the
can
steering
find.
block, like, I can run.
Yep, exactly.
No, that's cool. Yeah. So then, I do want to run through two more because I want to hear more about some of the kind of the workshops you do and stuff like that too. But it was active threat preparedness, which when I kind of read that is just for the sake of the words, it's almost kind of like how can you be prepared to be in a situation of active threat? It almost seems like one of those uncontrolled situations. So just kind of hearing that exact term.
Yeah, and where I came up with that is, you know, a lot of people get a little bit turned off when they hear active shooter. And really, there's so much more to active shooter that we decided to call it, me and my business partner decided to call it active threat preparedness because a threat can be someone that's fired. Let's just say you fired Dale from your manufacturing company or something, and 2 weeks later they're making threats and they want to come back, and that they're getting very aggressive. They're getting that way. That's an active threat. Like that is somebody that is an active threat versus active shooter. Yeah, that's really important. But you also have people that get in a car, they drive after you. You have certain situations like in my home state of Minnesota where a guy had two knives and he was running around a mall. So that's not an active shooter, but that's an active threat. So we want to encompass everything with active threat preparedness. So in ours, we do have a portion of it about best practices and how to survive an active threat. And we talked to people about more of a multi-option response because run, hide, fight is a very, very popular thing. And that was a good basis for everyone. And now this is just my personal opinion, again, from my experience and practitioner part of being a police officer, some research I've done out there. But there were a couple flaws with that. And we used to teach on that when we first started our company. But as we evolved from that, we started looking at some of these things, and especially with a multi option response. And one of the things that I didn't like about run, hide, fight is the hide part. And why that is because when people have that in their mind to hide, it's like crawling underneath your desk. And when you do that, you're a sitting duck. And so we took that out and gave it more of an barricading. So actively barricading, knowing how to do that. So, and we call them multi-option response from getting out, actively barricading, and then acting with aggression. And why we say that is because sometimes you can't do some of those processes. And run, hide, fight, they say, like, here's what you're going to do. You're either going to run, then you're going to hide, or then you're going to fight. Well, if you're on a bus or if you're on a plane, you can't get out of there. You can't run. There's nowhere to go. You're trapped in this little tube. You can't really hide in those places either. So you might have to act with aggression. Or if someone just pops up in front of you with a weapon, you might have to act with aggression right away. Whereas in run, hide, fight, they say only as a last resort do this, but that might have to be your first choice. So when we talk about that, that's just kind of evolving off of run, hide, fight to a multi option response. And then with that too, we talk about people's fear response, a little bit of intuition, threat assessment, and then the biggest part is prevention to all this. And the preventative part of this is caring about other people. I mean, you can put all the curved hallways you want, you can put bulletproof glass and everything, you can do all that. That's great. But really, truly, if we are very kind to each other and we have a good workplace environment and treat each other with respect, and care, that's the biggest preventative pieces from any of these happening. So that is, to me, a lot more complex and a lot better for people than just
Yeah.
active shooter training.
Yeah. Because, there is a lot more about just really mental health, um, people's stabilities. I think that there is more and more awareness, at least from what I'm seeing on social media and people I've talked to on podcasts. I really do believe there is that kind of collective. Again, it might just be my perspective or perception of something, but I really do kind of feel like there's this conscious collective movement of sorts that is going towards some of these emotional stabilities and mental capabilities. So a lot more people dedicated to coaching, teaching, and really kind of speaking the word. I know it sounds like a little maybe cliche or Pollyannish, but just kind of speaking about love and light in a
Yep.
sense too. I believe it's out there. I think people are trying more and more, and so I mean that's really that the argument of that systemic, the systemic issues of that with the mental health
Yeah,
and awareness.
100%. And, you look in just history and how it's been in the past couple of years. I mean, we're the most divided when it comes to politically. People at work are feeling, left out. Some stuff with COVID has happened where we didn't have as much human interaction, and people don't have the best coping mechanisms now. And some stuff, where it's a lot of stuff with your phone and isolation. So a lot of that has, I mean, if you would have thought 5 years ago, I would have never thought that I would have a business like this, and now we're very busy, teaching people about workplace violence and having those discussions with them and how to de-escalate yourself and others and how to be prepared for one of these things to happen because, it used to be slips, trips, and falls, a couple other things around the workplace, but now one of the things on the rise is this. And out of California, it's a mandated, they have to have a workplace violence prevention policy, SB 553, and that's starting to, from the forums I've been reading, it's starting to spread throughout to other states now that they're looking at it. So it's kind of a sad deal, but really, I mean, I think my perspective is we got to get back to being nice human beings and being decent with each other and, finding those coping mechanisms that we can have.
Yeah, and really kind of talking about it. That is interesting about how you've seen the evolution of that type of communication or training, even within the workspace. But I'm just kind of huffing about the fact that teaching the greater populace of kindness, of being awareness, of mindfulness, good good communication, and even too, these things you talked about, honestly, like de-escalation, situational awareness. I know I asked the question, can you get better at it and stuff? And I really, really believe, I personally believe too, I mean, just on top of what you said is yes, we can get better at that. Our response mechanisms to in a work situation or in a life situation or family situation, it's easy to get set off. But the more you do, the more you can calm down, the more you can allow that to kind of brush off. It'll get quicker and quicker. I think, the fact that you were talked about somebody following somebody else, like driving, following them to their house, that is committed. Like you
Yeah.
said that, and I was like, wow, I was thinking about that. Like, I mean, you could be in traffic 45 minutes later, half hour later, whatever that is. But I'm like, wow, you're really committed to being angry at, and probably not just that person, but just whatever that person represented in your life to go that far, you
Yes,
know? That's
and
that's why.
it is, and like I said, it's one of those calls I can remember, and I still am a police officer, part-time role now, but that was one of those calls where you would just have people that maybe had a slight anger issue, but not really anything bad. They just had a little bit more than normal, and that would happen to them, and they would do things that you just couldn't believe. It's like, I can't believe this person, like, no criminal record, but they got cut off in traffic. Now there's this road rage, and they're just so above and beyond. It's like, what are you doing? And that to the point where they're going to go to jail or prison now and ruin their life over something that happened that might have been a complete accident. So one of the things that I talk about too, it's a new method that I kind of started piecing together that I think works really well too. And again, this is one of those methods that I like to teach people about, that I don't want it to become a habit, but it's something that I think is really good for people to understand, and I'll explain it. And I call it the Marshall Mathers or the M&M theory. So I was watching 8 Mile, and have you seen 8 Mile before?
Yeah, a long time ago, years ago at this
Okay,
point, yeah.
years ago. And do you remember at the end of that movie, the rap battle he had and how he won? Do you remember how he got that?
Yeah, well, he was just kind of almost self-reflective and open and just transparent, in a sense. He kinda owned all the inadequacies or the insecurities of it.
Bingo. So I have this method that I teach people, and it's called the Own It method. And I put up a picture of him, and I just say, "Who's seen this movie? What do you remember about at the end?" And basically, the rap battle, the other guy has nothing to say because he owns his life. He says, "Yeah, these things, this, that, me, my buddies are this is that. You're better, whatever, you know." And so he does that, and he leaves the person speechless. So my point is this: is I'll take it from a perspective of, let's just say you have a son or daughter, and you get a call from school, and they say, "Hey, your son or daughter was misbehaving, they did bad on their tests. They had some late work and this, and you're very upset about that situation." And in comes your son or daughter from after school, and they come in, and right away it's all excuses. That's just going to fire you up, where you're just going to get upset with everything, right? But if your son or daughter came in and said, "You know what, mom and dad, I screwed up and I got to be better about my life. I'm going to do this, and this," and they just own it, it's like it takes the wind right out of your sails from that. And what I tell people is, sometimes you can do this. If someone's very upset with you, but you know that they're wrong, sometimes just own it. Just say, "You know what? You're absolutely right. You are right. And this is a very good posture. You're absolutely right. And I shouldn't have done that. Yep." And now when they drop back down to that rational way of thinking, that's when you engage that conversation. But at that time, when they're being irrational, if you go back at them with being irrational as well, nothing is going to happen. Like you were talking about, you get too emotional, and now you're not hearing each other. But if you just say, "Hey," like I've had it a couple times where a couple of my friends in the bar have done some dumb things, and I'll just say to someone like, "Hey, that's totally my friend's fault, my fault. I should have been taking care of that. I'm sorry. That won't happen again. It's all on me." And it's just amazing what it will do to people, as far as it will just drop the wind right out of their sails. Like, wow, it's like they don't have anything to
Yeah,
say.
yeah, it's like
Absolutely.
disarming, you know?
Yes,
Yeah.
very
You're
disarming.
taking all yeah,
Yep,
yeah. You're taking all the ammo, the reason for being aggressive, you're acknowledging it,
right.
and I think that some of it too, honestly, like, when we're in those states, I think there's a sense of just being right, or like, I'm gonna tell it's either I'm right or I just wanna tell you you're wrong, like when you're in the really lost in those things, and if you give somebody that, you're like, there's not much else there's nothing else to argue in a sense too.
No, and where I use a lot of metaphors in my training, so I talk about, we have to weather the storm. Like when someone's really emotional, that's a storm and it's coming at us. Weather it. Don't go running into it. You run into that storm, That's where bad things happen. So weather the storm, but really to get that storm to stop, own it. And when you own it, when you sit back and you can own something, just say, "Hey, you're absolutely." It's just amazing how that storm, that tornado that was forming, it just goes away. And it's incredible. Now, why I say to be careful with this, because I don't want it to turn into like a hostile work environment where you're doing that all the time just to please. That's not what I want to get into, right? But in certain circumstances, that is a very, very good way that you can de-escalate a situation so that it doesn't keep escalating.
I agree because life situation, I think that is important to acknowledge to not create a habitual thing because then certain personalities will you give them an inch and they'll take a mile and all of a
Exactly.
sudden they're coming at you all the time
Yep.
because they know you're just going to absorb it and add that erodes the other. But I don't want to get lost in that. But you create a real pattern dynamic there too. So I'm glad you acknowledged the habitual aspect of it. Like you had mentioned too, you were a teacher, a police person, and now you're doing a lot of keynote speaking. This is me asking as far as like I'm a podcast host. So talking about the speaking aspect of it, I believe you're going to start a podcast soon. What's that like for the speaking aspect of it? Just as we're talking just speaker, teacher, and that aspect of it
I
for you.
absolutely I love it. I think I was born to do that. I really enjoy speaking. It's one of those things that I got comfortable with it starting as a police officer and becoming a trainer, then going into high school and learning how to pretty much entertain a class of students, 20 to 30 students every day. And you got to figure out how you can do that and how you can sell that and then becoming a professor. And I think just what I like so much about, I've done a lot of training sessions, which is good, and breakout sessions, which I still love, and I love what I do. But with the keynote, it's that more emotional impact that you can have where you're telling your story. And that story that you can have, you can be vulnerable with it, and you can teach people just the ways that what you have been through, and it's storytelling. You're telling your story, but also they are learning things along that way. And it's just one of those things I absolutely love. I built out my keynote last year. I've delivered it a couple times, and now I'm going to be delivering it at a couple conferences. And it's one of those things I'm always working on. I'm practicing it. I've already moved some things around, and it's always evolving. And I absolutely love it.
Yeah, I do. I love that, man. That's the power of storytelling and really kind of positioning yourself in such a way where there's an allowance of the other person can see themselves in that spot or identify with it. And that's when you get really good at that storytelling, man, you can really move crowds. Are you more of a memorization person or is it more about the bullet points? And I ask because I'm much more bullet point oriented. Like if I've got my key points, I like to just reiterate off of that. But some people are very methodical and they've got their script down.
That's an excellent
What's your
question,
style?
and that's funny you bring that up because that's actually I've been having a couple mastermind conversations with speakers that have been in the game longer than me, and I've told them, I said, one of the things I'm struggling with right now is I have a lot of PowerPoints in what I teach, and I have these bullet points that I got, and I do this kind of stuff. And now, when you see a lot of really good keynote speakers, they might not have any PowerPoint, or they got 3 or 4 slides. And that was one of the things that was tough for me is to kick all those and go into the story. So to your point, I have started with the bullet points, but as I've done that, now I replace them with a picture because I know if I just see that picture, I know what's in my brain, what I'm going to talk about. And now I went from 50 slides down to 30, and that really helps that way because I used to have bullet points and a lot of that way and 4 or 5 different slides, but now my one picture can really get into that. And I just know with my memory seeing that, like, okay, that's what I'm going to talk about now. So that's really helped me along the ways.
Yeah, I could see that too. Because if there's too much information too, and you're really, it's almost distracting. It's almost taken away because there's just too much information you're giving somebody on the street, like a 50-page PowerPoint. That's a lot of clicking through that, and I'm not I didn't see it, so I'm not criticizing you. I have no idea, but I would imagine when you first started, it was very paint by numbers. And honestly, some of the more emotional ones, they come off like if it's not a story about yourself or it's a learning point or was something you said earlier too, and I can't think about, or if it's just like a little idiom or a little quote or something like that. It's like burn the ships, like you're going all in, burn the ships, that type of thing. So, you get like a quote, it'll be like Heracles, it'll be like, no man walks through the river twice because he's not the same man and it's not the same river. There's like those things, and now you can anchor in something and go a little deeper built on that. But a lot of times too, it might even come when based on the room or based on a conversation you had somebody within the crowd before that, or And now you can really anchor those points. So sorry, I'm going off on a little bit of a
Oh, yeah.
tangent, but I think that there's a real power as people become speakers and the exercise of that. I think it's really important.
One of the things I learned from one of my mentors, the guy that wrote the book with Dr. Richard Gasway, was it's interesting what our subconscious will remember. Two things that we can bring right from the big area of our subconscious to our conscious memory right away: emotions and repetitions. If you were to say your ABCs right now, you can say no problem. But if you do it backwards, you would struggle with it. When you do those repetitions over and over, it comes naturally, but also emotionally, like you were just talking about, if you can tie into people's emotions and deliver a message simple, and you keep saying that with those emotions, people are going to remember you. Just like you'll remember 9/11, and you know where you were, exactly what you were doing, but you can't remember 3 weeks from that day what you had for breakfast. You have no clue because it wasn't emotional. It wasn't a repetitive thing. So that's where I try to keep something a little bit repetitive. And my thing is caring is cool. In high stakes teamwork, caring is cool. When you de escalate others, caring is cool. So I try to tie that part in, and then also some emotional stuff that I've gone through in my life into that, and that's how I try to tie that in so people will remember my message.
There's an
Mhm.
essence of like, there's been billions of people that have lived on this earth and everything's been kind of said and done under the sun in a sense. So it relieves the pressure off of me in some ways where I'm not trying to be some intellectual genius and string a pearl of words together that are the most profound thing that you've ever heard in your life, Drew. And some of it is messy and some of it's raw, and that's some of those human connection points. It's also giving ourselves some grace in the moment, I think, too, and just having the allowance of you know, because we're all going to kind of say an or we're going to kind of hesitate there or pivot a little bit, maybe forget one word that you thought you wanted or something like that. But I think it's just having the confidence and understanding that even if you mess up, you didn't mess up.
Right.
Kind of a reason, an undertone of it all, kind of a river of energy that goes underneath it. It was perfect the way it was, no matter what you did. You know?
100%, and having that
So
humility with that is so important. We're not better than anyone else. We're just telling our story out there, and I'll always listen to people if they give me feedback about that. But I am always looking to learn and evolve from that. So you're absolutely right, and that's what I love about keynote speaking. And a lot of people have that fear, to get up and speak in front of other people, and it can be tough, but it keeps me alive. I thrive off that. I absolutely love it, and I'm passionate about it. So it's just great.
yeah. Just the communication and the sharing and it takes a hot second, like we're sitting here talking on a podcast. And again, you're gonna start a podcast soon enough here, kind of got the wheels in line. There's a process to that, even that evolution of watching ourselves or hearing a little bit of criticism there and being open with the space of it, or knowing that you can't please every audience and every person, that you can't appeal to everybody. So it's almost one of those little balances. This conversation right now we're having is not going to hit the mark for every person. So some of the criticism doesn't matter, but some of it may to improve what you're doing. So it's some discernments. I know there's a little duality in what I just said, but there's some depth to there too.
No, and I like what you have to say about that. And I just saw someone wrote an inspirational quote about this, and you brought something up that really is intriguing to me. And that is, someone wrote this and just said, I've never had a guy that has 30 years in marriage try to give me marriage advice. I've never had a billionaire try to give me money advice. And he said a couple other things, and I thought about that, and it's like, you know what? That's a good point. Like those people are always trying to build you up. It's sometimes the people down below that are trying to pull you down, or your biggest critics are these people that never would have they don't want to go and speak, or they don't want to, they're just more jealous, but they're the ones that are going to be the most critical of you. And sometimes when someone says something about that, it's like, no, I'm going to take advice from these people that are up here that are always trying to push me to be better. So it is interesting when you say that, because I have experienced that, and it's like, hey, these people always want you to get better. They do. They want to pull you up with you, where these people might want to pull you back down, and just recognize that and know, like, these are the ones that want what's best for you. So it's interesting.
It is. And I think just in having that recognition, you can tell, I think, authentically when somebody really does, they're like really supporting you. They're like, that's awesome, like, and I was like, and then you're like, oh, I kind of screwed up. And I'm like, so what? You screwed up here or there. It doesn't matter, man. It was just, it's an incredible experience. And that's all there is to it. And I think too, is that there's an evolution of what, some of the messaging is too, as far as like the keynote speech changes all the time. Honestly, I don't want to keep barreling on the podcasting, it's like you work with a lot of people, so you'll be in the group settings and the evolution, like you being the teacher, you get to learn. Even with the podcast, every podcast, I get to learn something new, say something different, or pick up new knowledge from somebody that I'm talking to. This is the human experience. It's this journey of self mastery, of improving our existence and our minds and expanding. Maybe not everybody feels like they're on that journey all the time, or feel maybe there's a sense of disempowerment. But if I may, I'm talking boldly here to keynote speakers or group leaders or whatever it is, what we're doing now. I think for have people step through the door first, saying it's okay, and those people again might criticize us. But I think if you step through the door first, you kind of showed it was okay, and you didn't get eaten by a lion on the other side of the door. you know,
Yeah, I love that, and that's a good metaphor for that, and just like you're saying, that's why I wanna start a podcast too, is I wanna interview interesting people from all different walks of life, and I already have a couple topics I'm really excited about, and, I can't wait for it, and the way that you've done this and your setup is phenomenal, and I'm always learning from other people being on their podcasts, how they do things, and I think it's just such an incredible journey, and again, it draws in that human connection, so I absolutely love that.
yeah, yeah, and I'm not giving you advice here. I was going to say is, but I think that there's a sense of what I've found personally, again, I can only speak for myself in a sense, but is kind of that it's kind of the quest to find the authentic true voice, like your own true voice, and kind of let I was joking before we started here about burning sage and things like that and being woo woo. And it's just like we're all kind of cuckoo and quirky in our own way and just kind of owning it. And you connect with the people that make sense and other people, it's okay. It doesn't resonate. And I think on that journey, you find those moments of clarity. The words just flow and you really nail it and you co-create with other people. You do a lot of group work, or if it's a keynote, it's just the audience. When you hit those little strides, there's such an empowerment, which I think you said, it just really fills the tank. Man, you just know it's like we're all synced in the frequency and it's resonating.
It is.
That's beautiful.
And I tell people one of those things where it's better than any paycheck out there. That is the ultimate paycheck.
Yeah.
It truly is. When I would teach in high school and I would get a note from a student at the end of the year and said, "You were the best teacher I ever had," or "I learned so much in this class." I'm like, that was the biggest paycheck I've ever gotten in my life. And like you're talking about, when you have that satisfaction that you changed someone for the better or that you inspired them for something, it's an incredible feeling. It is just so great. It's better than any monetary thing, in my opinion, and that's why, I think it's so incredible. Yeah.
Maybe this is kind of my last question on that. Communication is just so important.
Mhm.
And I didn't anticipate our conversation going this route, but I think even in being a teacher, that's a very interesting aspect, or running like groups. And obviously you're teaching, coaching, mentoring in a sense. I'll ask you, like you personally, and I'm not going to use the word instinct, but you have the knowledge up here. There's already a conveyance of it. You kind of rehearsed it. When you go out there, do you just have this knowing of what's kind of what needs to be said during these times? Like, is there just really a deep knowing? Or is it that thing where we talked about with the rigidity? Like, I've got to hit 1, 2, 3 for the process. Or, again, I know it's kind of the same question I asked about being intuitive with the bullet points, but I'm almost thinking in those situations with, like you said, there was a kid that really resonated over the course of semester. You know, I don't think you were. I'm just gonna say, as I'm guessing you weren't jamming words down there. Just jamming words at them. You kind of knew what needed to be said in the moment.
Yeah, and what I would say about that and what my kind of style was with that is I like to kind of, when you heard me say like weathering the storm and doing that way, is my style when I would teach is, okay, I have to get this information to this person so that they can understand it. And I think that's where my business has been successful too, is how can I teach these people that have no clue what I'm about to talk about so that they can understand it? And so I like to bring it to their level when I do that. And if that's through using metaphors or if that's by using examples and saying, okay, so it'd be like this. And if they don't get that, okay, how about this? What is something that you enjoy doing? Okay, it would be like that. And I think when you start bringing that to their level, they can understand it. Because I think some people talk way above other people's heads, like,
Yeah.
hey, I'm going to dive deep in these academic things or this lingo or these phrases, and it's like you're so far over what you're talking to me about. Like, bring it all the way down. And I've had that where, and I kind of learned it from a doctor. Like, a doctor would say it like, they would use all the technical terms. I'm like, I have no clue what you're talking about, but then they would bring it all the way down to my level that I could understand. okay, where can I tie this in to make it an everyday example that I can show them what I'm talking about? So, hey, have you ever been cut off in traffic? Oh, yeah, I all have. Okay. How's that feeling when you get that? Yeah, I get a little bit upset. Okay, that's what I'm talking about right there. So it's just tying in those things that's an everyday deal that I can bring to their level. And that's more my style. And that's what I found has been successful for me.
It's funny because you were saying that, I was thinking of kind of like the image of kind of the swiping your ego away, like,
Yeah.
just, because it's getting the intellectual and being like, "I'm gonna say something really genius," like we were joking before too. It's just forget it. Because when I think this goes into the coaching thing too, and I've had these conversations before, but when there's somebody that's doing it when you're doing it for somebody else's benefit, it's a different energy communication point rather than you're kind of just doing it. I'm just like going to tell you what I know, and just kind of jam it in your brain a little bit. But when you're really doing that, you're kind of giving them the meal they recognize. Not everybody recognizes every meal. So you're kind of feeding them to what you mentioned, to kind of their level of communication or location of it all. I think at some level, we only really heal or learn to the location or position we're willing to hear, absorb. If we're too wrapped in the ego and we can't swipe that ego away, we're not going to absorb it. We're not going to hear things, being fixed. So what you're saying too is what's nice is you're just bringing it to something relatable. And then you can get a little more technical. Once they're engaged, you can get a little more technical on it.
I
If
love
yeah,
that.
if I'm hitting it.
Yeah, you're hitting it big time. My biggest thing is I'm always going with humility because I don't know everything and I'm not an expert in everything. And there's always going to be someone smarter than me when it comes to this stuff. And I'll always listen to you. But if you start with that ego right away where, hey, I'm the best at this and everything, and someone shows you up, oof, I mean, that's a tough thing. And I've seen that before with some speakers or some trainers. And it's like, oh gosh, you're coming in here and you're thinking you're better than everyone. You're already turning them off. Like they're already not there. And so, yeah, it's that humility. And I do find it's good when you rip on yourself a little bit, people do really enjoy that, and when I get people comfortable with me, then I'll start even saying stuff because they know based on my personality after maybe a half hour, I'm like, "Hey, I'm a big fan of me, just ask me, I can talk about myself all day," and then they'll start to laugh and chuckle, and it just kind of brings them to that level. Or I'll say as a police officer, I was on a lot of raids, and people are like, "Oh my gosh, like SWAT raids?" I'm like, "No, I went on lot of raids on, World of Warcraft. I was a guild master and everything like that." And yeah, you get people like laughing like that way, and
Awesome.
it's again, you just bring
Yeah.
them to that level
Subvert,
with yeah, exactly. And so that works so well, and
you're
that's
subverting expectations.
exactly. And then people tend to like that more, and then you're more real with them. And that's what's worked out for me really well. And I learned that a lot in high school. That was, the high school teaching
Yeah.
is where I really learned that.
Yeah, it's really interesting you said that too, because it was almost like this equalizer, like you're not better than them. You have to have authority or something, you have to have the perceived authority because you have to have people have confidence in you, trust what you're saying is, good information. But then that equalizer of, hey, I'm not sitting here because I'm better than you.
Yeah,
I have a set of skills or some knowledge. I'm here to share with you. And we can do this together, or, whatever that looks like. So yeah, I
100%.
appreciate that, but that is an interesting perspective. I just saw that kind of the equalizer on that, how you said that.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it too is having the experience and practitioner part of it, and a lot of speakers I've met, they're around my age, about 40, or there's some younger, but some are older, and I think again that comes with just life experience, and you've either worked a different job or you've had that, and then you can speak about it and your experiences, and that's just something that develops over time. So yeah, to your point, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think there's a recognition there too. I was going to say for anybody really hearing this too, is we all have a sense of deep knowledge and levels of genius. I think even two geniuses in the mundane. Somebody's working at a job for 15, 20 years. They've learned every tiny little trick and nuance possible, and for them, it's just something they do on a Tuesday, but it's somebody else. It's like there's true craftsmanship or something in there. So I think not to I think it's kind of give ourselves all that permission slip to have the recognition and the knowing or just to be able to share that. And I think we all have that ability and positioning that we can.
100%, absolutely. So
Yeah. So here, man, I had so many other questions about you with being a cop and all sorts of stuff, but we're gonna have to do a second show.
yeah.
So I almost feel sad right now. But how can people get a hold of you? What's the best way to work with you or reach out or yeah.
Yeah, for sure. would love to talk about any of that kind of stuff. Like I said, I'm starting my own podcast here soon. But if your organization does de-escalation training, active threat preparedness, or situational awareness, anything that way, my website is either blue, so BLUE dash ethos.com, or if you're looking at my speaking stuff, it's drewthespeaker.com. And so the blue dash ethos.com, that's my business. And then drewthespeaker.com, that is my speaking website where I do keynotes and breakout sessions that way. Go to conferences, love that kind of stuff. And then if you want to get connected with me, it's my email is drew at blue dash ethos, ethos.com. And you can just drop me an email and would love to hear from you. So I really appreciate it. And if that's how you want to get a hold of me, those are the websites and that's my email.
Absolutely, man. So thank you again for joining today. This is great. This has been great.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. I've really enjoyed it. And like you said, we'll have to do a part two as well. I would love that.
100%.